This is your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Hope you guys are having a good day out there today, enjoying a nice June so far. I think we've been outside quite a bit. I hope you guys have too, but inside right now recording this podcast for you to listen to. Got a lot of great stuff to get to today. Mark Coyle, University of Minnesota athletic director, will join me here in a little bit. I caught up with Mark last night at Gophers Coaches Caravan. They started doing that again after a couple-year hiatus. They were out in Stillwater on Monday evening. Really nice event out there. Some fans came out to meet some coaches. Saw Ben Johnson out there. Saw Lindsay Whalen out there. Both of them will be on a podcast later this week. Talk to them together because I think they're an interesting tandem. They're interesting individually as well, but I thought I would ask them some of the same things, so I talked to them at the same time. So that'll be on a show later this week. Bunch of other coaches out there as well, including Gophers wrestling coach Brandon Eggum. I think gymnastics coach Jenny Hansen was out there. So a good turnout, a lot of good folks out there, people I hadn't seen for a little while. So looking forward to playing that interview with Mark Coyle for you here in just a little bit. Got some extended thoughts on name, image, and likeness as well, because Mark and I talked extensively about that during our chat, and that's become such a big topic in college sports. Got to get to an interesting thing from the Twins Jays series. I know that's a little bit in the rearview mirror now, but it looked like the Twins might have been on to Kevin Gausman, the excellent Toronto pitcher in Sunday's game. Something about his split finger fastball, or at least his off speed pitches. They seem to be detecting something in his delivery, perhaps, that was telling them what pitch was going to come. Whatever it was, they laid off that pitch. So it's just an interesting kind of cat and mouse in that game. The Twins very effective in that game, knocked Gausman out, his worst start of the season. They won that game. So I want to spend a little bit of time on that, but also spin forward, of course, to this big series coming up starting tonight against the Yankees. Looks like a nice few days for baseball here in the Twin Cities, so hope you guys can get out to a game like Patrick Royce and I talked about Monday. Attendance at Target Field has not been great this year, only 2 games over 23,000. So I'll be interested to see what kind of crowd they get for the Yankees. While it is, midweek, you kind of getting into the summer months now where people don't mind getting out in the middle of the week. So we'll see all about that. But first, what did I miss? Well, one team that is run by Kroenke Sports and Entertainment, I believe that is the holding company. Yeah, Kroenke Sports Entertainment is having a better last 10 days, maybe even a little bit longer than another. That's a holding company, has an ownership stake in a lot of teams, not just in the United States. They've got big stake in a lot of international teams as well. But two of the big ones, and they kind of started out they're based in Colorado. Two of the big ones are the Colorado Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets. Colorado Avalanche advanced to the Stanley Cup Finals with a 6-5 win over Edmonton on Monday night. A comeback win. They were down 4-2 in that game. Just a great overtime goal. I don't know if you guys saw it, but just the way that goal was scored, deflection of a shot, puck was controlled. Just one of those goals where you had to see it almost to believe it. But it was one of those plays where you just were like, how did they do that? How did they how were they able to do it? It was it was Lehkonen, Arturi Lehkonen. Basically knocked a pass out of midair, deflected it, and then got the puck and basically shot into an empty net. It was a back and forth kind of game, a high scoring series. Colorado with all sorts of firepower, and they are now through to the Cup Finals, 12-2 so far in the playoffs this year, including 7-0 on the road. So things going very well for the Colorado Avalanche. Things not going quite as well for the Denver Nuggets, which is another team, of course, owned by the Kroenke Sports Entertainment Group. Late last week, we haven't gotten into this yet because I think this happened after I recorded Friday's show, and Royce and I didn't get into it yesterday. Late last week, Josh Kroenke, who is the vice chairman of Kroenke Sports Entertainment, spoke with the Denver media. First time in more than 4 years, according to the Denver Post, that Josh Kroenke has spoken to the media, at least in this kind of setting. And he talked about a lot of stuff related to the Nuggets, but in particular had some interesting comments, locally pertinent comments about Tim Connelly, the executive, the president of basketball operations, who left Denver to come run the Timberwolves, and that was an officially announced thing a couple weeks ago, and he was introduced to the Twin Cities and had a news conference last week at this time. Connelly did. So, we knew at the time that a lot of that was, the Wolves essentially made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, right? It was 5 years, $40 million, and some sort of bonus tied to franchise value, performance, things like that could escalate his salary even higher. So Kroenke hadn't talked since then, hadn't talked in forever, it sounds like, and had some interesting things to say about it. He used the phrase phantom equity to describe the what the Wolves were giving Connelly in addition to the 5 years and $40 million. Called it a bonus scheme, and said the Nuggets aren't a startup organization that would give such incentives to an executive. So right there, some interesting language that we're dealing with in terms of the offer the Wolves gave, the offer that Connelly ultimately accepted. So you can sense some little bit of bitterness here. He said, ultimately, this is another Kroenke quote, reading from the Denver Post story. Ultimately, when you go to a stratosphere that some clubs, you say some desperate clubs, are willing to go to, there's a tier out there that just kind of doesn't make sense, he said. And he used the word desperate another time in that news conference, and said the Wolves kind of went through, quote, the side door to take Connelly away from the Nuggets. Now, this is interesting. It does feel like a little bit, maybe even more than a little bit of sour grapes at this point, right? The Wolves coveted somebody. They got permission to make him an offer. They made him a very strong offer. It's an offer that is not governed by salary cap. It's a creative kind of offer. Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez probably brokering a lot of that. Glenn Taylor certainly playing a key role as well as he transitions the team to Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez, the new ownership. But, just an interesting kind of tone, and I wonder how that will play out as time goes on. I mean, Denver could be a very good rival for the Wolves. The Wolves could use like a bona fide rival, right? I mean, they kind of started it a little bit with that game 82 in 2018 when the Wolves made the playoffs and Denver didn't. But since then, Denver has had a much smoother upward trajectory than the Wolves have. Denver made the playoffs each of those next 4 years, won a few playoff series in there, made it to a conference finals. The Wolves took a pretty big step back, of course, after that game 182. Not game 182. Imagine if the NBA season was 182 games. Game 82. That the Jimmy Butler stuff fell apart after that. They went into a reboot and are now coming out of it, having made the postseason this last year, and now Connelly joining them to hopefully build on that and, get further than just the first round. But the Wolves could use a rival, and it sounds like Denver wants to be that rival. And if you remember, Denver, the only reason Connelly had this job was in 2013. Denver lost Masai Ujiri who took a similar job in Toronto. Toronto ends up winning an NBA Finals 6 years later. So, Denver has a reputation for maybe not paying its executives what they think they're worth, maybe going a little cheap on that regard. So, I don't know. It was just an interesting kind of aggressive approach that Josh Kroenke took to this whole story, and he seems a little bit bitter about it. And when I wrote about it, I concluded by saying maybe he'd be better served holding up a mirror instead of a flashlight to the situation, saying that maybe it's something Denver's doing and not something some of these other teams are doing that is causing this to happen. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on the rest of the way with this, but I would love if this becomes a rivalry, if this becomes a thing, because the Wolves, took Tim Connelly away from Denver, and Tim Connelly found some success here. Denver obviously has Nikola Jokic still, two-time reigning MVP. They've got Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. coming off of injuries. If those guys get healthy next year, they should be a very good team in the West, but the Wolves, also a team that should be on the rise. Not sure if it's going to happen next year, but just pay attention to this. Keep this in mind as these two teams kind of go about their business as the years go on, and whether or not this can be the catalyst for a true Timberwolves rivalry.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Really happy to be joined on today's Daily Delivery podcast by Mark Coyle, athletic director for the Gophers. Mark, I was just looking up. It feels like the time flies. 6 years, about 6 years since you've been hired. What does it feel like? Time has flown, or did the COVID kind of make it feel like it's been 20? Or how do we arrive at 6 years?
I'm excited that we're still standing. There's no doubt if you, Michael, if you go back and think about what we've all been through the last 27, 28 months, it's just absolutely bonkers. But again, just really humbled and excited to be here in Minnesota. When I was hired 6 years ago, I was emotional because this place means a lot to me and my family. We see this place as a destination, and it's hard to believe that's been 6 years. We're starting year 7, and it's been a great place for me and my family, and just really humbled to be a part of the Gopher Athletic Program.
You've done a lot so far. I think hiring has been one of the things you've been known for here. I mean, I think you and I have talked in the past about kind of your process for making big hires, but as you kind of have thought about the evolution of the people you've brought in here, how has each search or each kind of team, how have you kind of approached a lot of those high-profile hires that we now see with PJ Fleck, Bob Motzko, Lindsey Whalen, Ben Johnson, a lot of these high-profile coaches in these big positions right now?
Yeah, well, Michael, I learned a lot. When my first job, when I was the athletic director at Boise State, after my first year, we had a change in our soccer program, our women's soccer program, and I remember walking into that room to meet with the team, and the look on their faces of what's going to happen next. And so I try to always operate with a sense of urgency when we make a coaching change or if a coach leaves us. And I think if you look back at the 6 years when we've had to make a new coaching hire, we've moved very quickly because I do have a great empathy for the student athletes. They were brought to this institution to compete academically, athletically, and socially. And so we try to go out and find the best person for that job in terms of how they'll interact with our student athletes, with our culture of our department, and our team. And I think if you go back and look at the hires we've made, I've got great people I work with, Julie Manning, Dusty Clements, Peyton Owens, Tim McCleary, Trishy Budka. I could go on down the name of the people that have been a huge part of our success here of hiring these great coaches. But again, I think we have a really good understanding of who we are, what we want to be, the type of people we want that comes to Minnesota to help us continue to build our program the right way.
You've had to make tough decisions along the way too. Eliminating programs was part of that. As the dust has kind of settled from that, how's the department kind of moved from that point to where it wants to be now?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. I mean, I think people sometimes forget. I've been in college athletics for 30 years.
Yep.
I'm finishing my 10th year as an athletic director, so I'm still learning every day. The last thing you want to do is have to take away opportunities from people, and we had to make some really, really difficult decisions. As you know, we looked at the financial situation, Title IX considerations, and at the end of the day, I had to make a tough call on what I thought would be the best for our department. So we went through those difficult decisions. I understand why people are frustrated, why they're hurt. I get that. but we feel like those decisions are necessary to help us move our program forward. And I think if you look at our department right now, athletically, we're in ranked 11th in the Directors Cup right now, which puts you in the top 5%. Academically, 3.44 grade point average. We're the highest rated public school in the country. So I'm really proud of what our student athletes and our staff are doing day in and day out to represent the state of Minnesota in a first-class manner.
You talked about, we talked about COVID. It's kind of inescapable to talk about what we're kind of hopefully coming out of to a certain degree now. It's been survival mode kind of for 2 years in a certain degree, probably from a budget standpoint, from an everything standpoint, as you maybe not like you weren't thinking strategically over those 2 years, but as you maybe are able to think about some of that even more so now and implement some things you want to do. What are some big, whether they're big ticket or big agenda items that are on the next 5-year plan or whatever you want to do here?
Well, obviously, college athletics is going through a lot right now. I mean,
a little bit.
That might be the understatement of the year. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize President Gable. Mike, she has been awesome. She has been so supportive of our student athletes, our coaches, and our staff. I think we have really, really strong alignment with our Board of Regents. And for us to continue to move our department forward as we try to navigate through the NIL, and that seems to change every day. The Alston case where student athletes can receive academic incentives for academic progress towards a degree for competing, etc. As we try to navigate these changes, the realignment that happened last year with the SEC, with Texas and Oklahoma, right? And then you saw a trickle-down effect of realignment in some of the other conferences. How does that impact the Big Ten, etc.? And I tell my wife every day, I am so grateful that I'm here at Minnesota, that we're a legacy member of the Big Ten Conference. I feel like the Big Ten Conference has a great sense of principles and will always continue to make value-based decisions. So when you ask me about the next 4 or 5 years, I think it's critically important that we focus on making the best value-based decisions for the University of Minnesota to make sure that we continue to always be mindful of the academic mission, the athletic mission, of making sure we represent this institution and this state in a first-class manner in everything we do.
You mentioned name, image, and likeness. I mean, I feel like coaches are dealing with that in recruiting. How much does that touch you on a daily basis or on a decision-making basis?
It's every hour. I mean, it is a conversation that I have almost every hour with every coach, and I am so grateful. The coaches we have in place right now have been awesome in trying to make sure, NIL, there's so much uncertainty around it. And Jeremiah Carter, who heads up our compliance, has done a wonderful job. Jeremiah, a former student athlete here, worked at the NCAA and has been in Minnesota for several years. He and Julie Manning, our deputy athletics director, have been two key figures in our NIL space in making sure we provide the education to our student athletes, we provide the opportunities to our student athletes, and as we start to move forward with NIL, we just want to make sure people are going 75 right now and the speed limit's 55. We want to make sure that we stay within the guardrails and that we do things the right way. So when we do get more guidance nationally on what NIL is going to look like, Minnesota's in a good position. But we feel very proud of our program. We have 22 sports. We have student athletes in every sport has some sort of agreement in NIL right now.
Yeah.
So it's very broad-based. We feel like we give our student athletes a lot of opportunities. And again, we're all for that. We want to support them and make sure, again, we can do the next best right thing for our student athletes in our program.
Do you feel like, when NIL was implemented, that you could have, did you look at it when it came in and say, I can predict where this is going, or is it just blown people away and be like, this is going faster than I could have imagined, or it's gone in a direction that we could not have comprehended?
I've used the word clunky more in the last 24 months than I ever have in my life. I think NIL has been clunky for everybody. I mean, you look across the country and how different schools, different states, different institutions are implementing NIL. And again, a lot of credit goes to Julie, to Jeremiah, and my staff. We've worked incredibly hard. Peyton Owens on our staff. We've worked incredibly hard to do everything we can just to position Minnesota so that when we bring a young man or young woman to our campus, they know that they can maximize their NIL, that we're going to do it the right way, we're going to represent our program the right way. So it's been clunky. There's no doubt it's been clunky. I'm not sure when this will air, but it will change in the next 24, 48 hours. That's how NIL is right now. You see different deals, different collectives, different things going on. And again, we just want to make sure that we position our student athletes to have all the opportunities they can have to maximize their experience in Minnesota with respect to NIL.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you probably don't have to deal with as much transfer portal stuff, but you probably do. I mean, do you feel like, this job must have changed, even, like you're saying, it's changing every 24 hours almost, if that's what NIL is. That's kind of what you sign up for when you become a high-level administrator. At the same time, I feel like, college athletics, just like the world, the pace of change has accelerated to the point where it's almost kind of like it's probably almost hard to plan because you don't know what the target is in 6 months from now even.
Yeah, I had a great chance again when I was at Boise State working with Chris Peterson, who was our football coach, and Chris now teaches in the business school over at Washington, and Chris is always so gracious with his time, and I remember talking to Chris a lot throughout COVID, and Chris talked about always like, hey, you got to do the next best right thing. How can you make decisions to do the next best right thing, because literally our ground is shaking and shifting on us right now as we try to make these decisions, and so we've been focused on trying to do the next best right thing for Minnesota, and there's no doubt, if you look at the record number of ADs who are stepping down, not only in athletics but everywhere. It's been bonkers again what we've all been through the past 27 months, and I've heard people use the word we're all tired, but we're also depleted. And what can we do to kind of recharge ourselves, get ourselves more energized? Because again, we have a great opportunity. I'm around coaches who are highly competitive. I'm around student athletes who are highly competitive, and again, I feel very blessed and humbled to be here in Minnesota and look forward to the future of Gopher athletics and the many great things we're going to do.
Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot. Last question. What's your favorite sports venue on the U of M campus?
I like them all.
You can't say that. You can't say that. I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, actually, I think you've been to a lot of our venues.
Probably been to all of them.
Yeah, and what Jeannie Hansen's done with women's gymnastics is phenomenal. The pavilion for Materi Pavilion for volleyball is phenomenal. The Gopher hockey game against Michigan this year in the Big Ten tournament was phenomenal.
You're going to list them all, aren't you? You're going to list them all. Okay. You're going to list them all. Okay.
I love Aaron with soccer. So again, I like them all.
What's your least favorite? I'm just kidding.
My least favorite is when it's cold. We got to work our way through the cold, but I like them all. It's great.
You like Williams Arena?
I think Williams Arena is very special, and I had a chance. I just finished my first year on the NCAA men's basketball committee, and I've had a chance to travel and watch way too many college basketball games, and there's something special about walking up the court to Williams Arena that every coach I talk to and I meet talks about that experience of walking up onto the court. So I think that will always make Minnesota unique on that side.
Appreciate it, Mark. Go mingle. Take care.
Try to dodge that one.
Appreciated that chance to catch up with Mark Coyle. He did a deft dodging of that last question. He did answer some other questions, though, that I thought was interesting. The amount of time that he spends on name, image, and likeness jumped out at me because we hear about NIL, we hear about the changing landscape in college sports, how athletes being able to capitalize, to monetize on their name, image, and likeness has become such a game changer, allowing them to, have income as amateur athletes, which I think is fantastic. I think this is a great spirit of the rule. I'm glad that athletes are able to do this. The class I taught at the University of Minnesota in the journalism school this past semester, we talked a lot about that. We even had a couple of college athletes in the class who could give their perspective on it. I thought that was very interesting to kind of hear, how for some of them it's just, they get gear or they get something, but, at least it's something they wouldn't have gotten before. But, we're talking about major college football programs now where we're talking about, some 7-figure deals being talked about. And, sounds like Minnesota is being fairly cautious is maybe the wrong word, but, trying to figure out where this is going, not trying to jump ahead of the game and then wind up getting told that, no, you can't do that and finding some sort of sanction along the way. But this is obviously such a game changer in college sports and how much time they're having to devote to this, to the compliance with it, to, how this affects recruiting. It shouldn't be a mystery to us because it is such a hot topic, but, how the NCAA is going to govern this going forward, whether or not they overreach at a certain point, because, the NCAA all along has been, kind of this unfair, practice of the coaches, the administrators get a lot, and the athletes get, you get an education, which is great, but their labor is paying for a lot of big money salaries for a lot of people. So why shouldn't they get some of this, whether it's in the form of, like I said, name, image, and likeness capitalization from booster payments, things like that. I hope they can figure out something that makes this so schools don't have to, govern this 24/7, but that athletes still get a fair share of whatever money is out there, because that to me is the big piece of this. But I don't think it's going to get easier before it gets less complicated. And, you heard Mark Coyle talking about a lot of different words like clunky and how much time they're spending on it. That probably detracts from other mission goals that they have. And this has just been kind of thrown upon them in addition to transfer portal stuff. And the transfer portal stuff I'll get into quite a bit with Ben Johnson and Lindsay Whalen on an upcoming podcast. It's just, it totally has changed the way they do their work. And, everything's in flux, right? Everything is change in sports, in life. Everything's an evolution that you adapt to. But this feels like a big moment in college sports, and how schools are able to navigate that will position them kind of going forward for where they fit in that pecking order. And I do wonder where the Gophers will ultimately wind up. Let's finish with an extended cooler. I want to talk Twins for a few minutes before we get out of here. An interesting story from over the weekend, Sunday's game when the Twins faced Kevin Gausman, and very good pitcher for Toronto. Has been having a very good season, but the Twins got to him. They got to him in in a pretty big way. He gave up, I think, 9 hits, 5 runs. Only 3 of the runs were earned, but his shortest start of the year, didn't even get out of the 4th inning. So that to me tells me right there. They had him pretty well figured out, and his best pitch, really his out pitch, is his split finger fastball, his splitter. Opponents, I think I saw Aaron Gleeman tweet, opponents hitting just 167 off of Gausman's splitter this season, swinging and missing almost half the time on that pitch. And the Twins, for whatever reason, were able to really lay off that pitch. He threw 13 splitters in the first inning of that Sunday game. Twins took 9 of them for balls. In the second inning, got 2 hits off of his splitter. And those were the innings they scored their 5 runs. Blue Jays broadcasters Dan Schulman and Joe Stahl were, both, right away, pretty soon in that game, were thinking the Twins seem to have figured out something about Gausman and his delivery or his approach or something he's doing that lets them know when he's throwing that splitter or at least an off-speed pitch. And they were really timing him up and able to lay off pitches that other teams hadn't been able to lay off. He ended up only throwing 6 splitters in the final 3 innings after throwing 13. So maybe Gausman also figured that out. There's a video breakdown by the account Raps Leafs Jays, obviously I think coming from Toronto with that headline, kind of showing a different grip on the ball. I don't know if you can pick that up as a hitter, or if that's the kind of thing that's just a slow motion thing on video, but if that's what the Twins were picking up on, that could be kind of what they were able to figure out. And again, even if it's just a subtle thing, even if you can kind of detect some of the time when that pitch is coming, it helps you not swing at it. And not swinging at it, a ball versus a strike makes such a big difference, and the count gets you into hitters' counts, things like that. So it's interesting to me, the cat and mouse game of figuring out something very subtle in somebody's delivery that is that's causing you to be able to have that edge. Nothing like the Astros and stealing signs using video technology, but if it's just something that you can see with the naked eye, with someone's delivery, that is absolutely fair game. That's just good scouting. And if that's what happened, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe we're making much ado about nothing. Maybe it was just that they had a good game plan and were able to lay off it. I don't know, but this is not necessarily a Twins team that has been known for its patient, great approach. So it does feel like maybe they had something figured out against him. So next time these two teams play, I'll be interested to see if Gausman pitches again and what kind of adjustments are made. That series will be August 4th through 7th at Target Field. So watch for that. That'll be an interesting subplot to watch for here in a couple of months. Starting tonight at Target Field, Twins and Yankees. Yankees are unbelievable this year. They're unbelievable a lot of years. They've got such a payroll advantage over most teams, but they are pitching so well this year. They just lost, but they are 39-15 on the season. Actually, no, they didn't just lose. They're on a big roll. 39-15 right now. They just clobbered the Tigers again, and they had Monday off. They swept the Tigers. Yeah, they are on a 6-game winning streak. But hey, Toronto was on an 8-game streak before the Twins cooled them off with 2 out of 3. So we'll see what happens in this 3-game series. A good test for the Twins. Well, Luis Arraez leading the American League in batting average. having a very good season. A lot of good stuff happening for the Twins right now in first place. Haven't fared great against the very, very best in baseball, getting pretty lopsided losses against the Dodgers and Astros so far this season. So we'll see if they fare any better against the Yankees. But it should be fun. This is why you watch baseball. This is why players compete, to see if they can do it against the very best. And that starts tonight at Target Field. That will do it for today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow.